I'm
All right.
loving this already.
All right, welcome to Conspiracy Club.
I'm gonna go grab some chapstick.
Okay.
But you can keep talking because I can hear.
Sure. This topic was, brought to me by the, recent incidents of Jeffrey Epstein being arrested and then allegedly killing himself in jail. And so just wanted to look at how the dots could be connected on something like this and other events, because things are often portrayed as isolated incidents when our pattern recognition systems would be going off if we had all the information, potentially. All right, so let's start off with what does satanic mean, because that's sort of like sort of a trigger word to people, right? Because most people who are, and I'm not even of like a Christian background or a Christian like persuasion, I'm not a Christian, but I have nothing against them, but that's just not where I'm coming from with this talk. And so basically, a lot of people will assume that satanic refers to the anthropomorphized Christian devil being worshipped by people in like very Hollywoodized sort of portrayals of Satanism. But what it actually is it's an amoral orientation to the world. So basically, it's just morals and values to the Satanistic perspective are just irrelevant. They're non sequiturs. And it's the denial that there is right and wrong on any, universal sense. And so it's total moral relativism. So you can say, like, there are elements of that in, like, extreme consumer culture or extreme, male dominator orientation toward the world, or in an extreme, like, gossiper, completely, like, rumor-spreading orientation. Anything that's Machiavellian and totally divorced from any care, it fits within the ideology of Satanism. Many people may be Satanists in effect and not realize it, that being the definition of it. And the other factor is that this is an old religion behind many of the extreme injustices and hiding powerful information to this very day. So Natalie, I know you might have missed that, but basically, so the term is satanic ritual abuse. Just wanted to clear up how satanic doesn't necessarily mean worshiping the Christian version of the devil. It just means basically where there's like Satanism going on in the universe. It's essentially a total abandonment of ethics and morality of any kind, and just a survival of the fittest sort of mentality that doesn't have the principle of care in it. And so that's what I'm referencing when I talk about. Exactly. And so that's what I'm referencing when I'm referencing satanic. Although they might carry out rituals that, use that type of imagery to fuck with people or whatever, it's not necessarily like their actual belief.
They could be like atheist, but still like
exactly.
Embody that.
Yeah, like if people look at like the Church of Satan or something like that, or these groups that sort of like espouse that on a open basis, they talk about it's an atheistic thing, but it's and not that atheism's bad, but their version of it is. And so basically, in essence, it means involution. Involution is the opposite of evolution. Ideally, as a species, as we came out of antiquity, we came from basically, hunter-gatherers and other animals before that. So we sort of developed an increasing capacity to care about things and to have a set of ethics and to raise our consciousness. And so involution, Satanism represents the involutionary force, which is the opposite of evolution. So it's essentially the breaking down of consciousness and the behaviors that lead to the human species degrading itself. And
that thing is crazy.
What's the last one?
I honestly don't know. It's just some sort of like, I don't know, like we don't even have legs anymore because we don't move.
Is that what we're gonna look like?
It looks like he's sitting
Yes.
in a pod.
No, I don't know.
Like the more leaned over
Yeah,
to
the
the smaller computer screen.
Yeah.
So
Everyone
scary.
thinks you're standing down.
I was just talking
Posture.
about that. Involution, like invalid.
I like that.
Same.
Okay, and then so...
Origins.
True. And then so SRA stands for satanic ritual abuse. The definition of that from my point of view, is the organized introduction of sexual and physical trauma to developing humans in order to compromise their development, induct them into a cult mind state, or simply to satisfy influential, well-connected pedophiles.
Oh my God.
And so, like a lot of
Alert.
like a lot of evil stuff that happens on the planet, it satisfies multiple objectives of the people who are committing it. It's not just one thing. It could be multiple motives. And then, so let's start with some examples. So we have the Franklin scandal. So this was in the late 80s in Omaha, Nebraska. There was an orphanage called Boys Town. And at Boys Town, there was a really influential politician there. His name was Larry King. And not the Larry King from the TV.
Oh.
But he was a different one. Yeah. And so Larry... And so Larry King, he was basically engaged in mass pedophilia, and he had a whole deluge of people around him, other politicians, business people.
I've heard about stuff like this.
Yeah,
And
really.
Some of them buy islands too to take them to.
We're about to get to that.
That's the recent
Yeah.
scandal, yeah.
And so that was going on in the late 80s. Basically, all the alleged victims of this are still like harassed by this day. So basically, it looks like there's a massive cover-up. And I have 5 examples, so I don't want to dwell too long on one. But the Franklin scandal is really interesting. There's a book called The Franklin Cover-Up, which shows how sort of every step of the way of how this was hidden and how the truth never came out and how it should still be investigated today. The Franklin scandal.
Amazon and just type in like conspiracy theory books and make a bookshelf of just those.
That'd be tight to have like a bookstore of that.
Yeah.
That would be.
What
That is
idea?
your. Yeah.
What? Wow.
All right, cool. So now we have Jimmy Savile. So Jimmy Savile was an...
Glasses.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like Jimmy.
He's creepy.
I really don't.
He was a influential DJ and like public figure and sort of social climber in the UK in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, I believe. He does, yeah. You just...
Real quick, everybody.
Oh, you are
Oh, shit.
appropriating him.
No!
No.
Jimmy Seville. If that's on your Instagram, I'm going back and commenting.
Yeah.
Do you have a picture on your Instagram? I'm gonna tag him.
Oh, God.
I think I have that.
I think he's dead. So, but he he was a big figure in the UK. He allegedly had thousands of child victims of pedophilia, thousands. And so, obviously the impact that being a victim of pedophilia has on someone's life, it completely fucks up their confidence, etc. So this is crazy how much a negative influence this person had. And so it was also very, very theorized that he was doing quote unquote satanic rituals with the kids, and there are a lot of people who say that, who are alleged victims. Go ahead.
With them, as in sacrificing them, or just
I don't know about
them?
killing them, but just basically the stereotypical satanic sort of ritual imagery stuff for whatever reason to freak them out. Yeah, exactly.
So include them in ceremonies.
Yes, exactly. And then and same with the case in the Franklin cover-up that I was mentioning before. A lot of the kids said that they actually sacrificed kids and killed them and sacrificed them to demons and stuff. It could have been hyperbole, who knows, but these accusations seem to circle around all these cases, and they get denied flat out with no investigation.
Also, you have to be pretty satanic to do that.
Yeah. Well, definitely by that definition of, satanic, where it's an amoral worldview that doesn't care about ethics completely, it's by definition.
That's a man.
And so Jimmy Savile, on the one hand, he did the rituals. On the other hand, he was, I'm forgetting what I was going to say. He was, what was it? Oh, yeah. It was believed that he and the Franklin scandal has this in common with it, that they were basically sharing in these acts of, molestation with politicians and influential people. And it's been rumored that it was because if you get influential people, and obviously the influential people are responsible as fuck for it, obviously, but if you somehow finesse them into participating in something like that and you have it on video, you have so much blackmail over them too completely.
I think that a lot of things are that way.
Yeah, for sure. And then so that's Jimmy Savile. That's one case in the UK. So we have the Finders cult.
Nope.
Why do they all look young and then the one with the glasses looks like randomly? The glasses is a disguise for sure. A wig.
You have found the leader of a... Okay, so the Finders cult... So the Finders cult in Florida in, I think it was like the early 90s. Yeah, Florida's fucked up.
Always Florida.
Yeah.
Florida, Indiana, and Washington.
So 2 Florida men were down there in Tallahassee or something, some city. And they were, and there were like 2 men in suits, really nice, expensive suits, that opened a van and let out like a few really dirty looking, like feral kids kind of, who didn't seem to have, you know what I mean? Like they just looked like they were like wild and had never been like, in civilization. But the men were impeccably dressed, and so it was very creepy. And so they got the cops called on them. And so immediately when the cops were like interrogating these 2 men in these fancy suits, they were like, I invoke my right to an attorney, like I'm not talking to you. And then literally the FBI steps in at a certain point in the very beginning and is like, and there are people who were, and that's true in the Franklin scandal too with the FBI, but in the Finders cult thing, the investigators now say like, the FBI came up to me and was like, this is above your pay grade, don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong, just like shut the fuck up and ignore this. And so, because they were acting like total order followers, they complied with that demand. And so, and also the leader of the Finders cult, he has a lot of ties to the CIA, and he's like an ex-military person. And, if there was an institution that was attempting to blackmail people by getting them on camera doing lewd things, it would be potentially like a secret agency like that, because obviously that's an activity that people don't want to come to light. So it would be that kind of institution that would, determine the mechanics of how that worked. So that's the story of the Finders cult. There's a lot more into it, but I don't want to belabor it.
So how'd they get the kids? I don't get it.
Oh, how'd they get the kids? Basically, they never found out. The kids said that they had no home and that like they were just part of like the Finders and they didn't like remember anything.
They were just brainwashed.
Okay, but this is Pizzagate. So you might have heard the word Pizzagate. It was invoked during the 2016 election, so it's kind of controversial. Essentially, but I just want to give you the straight and narrow on this. Like I'm not going to give you like, the Hillary side or the Trump side. I'm just going to give you like what the evidence said. So essentially this background thing, this isn't just like some creepy picture I thought like aligned with the idea. This was a piece of art on the wall of the restaurant that was implicated in the scandal that is now called Pizzagate. So in Washington, D.C., there was and still is, a businessman named James Alefantis. And James Alefantis owns a pizza store called Comet Ping Pong. And it's in kind of like a seedy, it's in sort of like a seedy, lesser known area of DC that's not high foot traffic. And basically that's what it is. And so on the, on Comet Ping Pong, their logo is actually, and I don't have the image up here, but it's like a spiral thing that the FBI, interesting, implicated again, but the FBI has named that spiral thing in investigations of like child online predators as one of their code symbols, as like meaning child pedophilia. Also, Comet Ping Pong stands for CP, which is like the law enforcement's phrase for child pornography.
What?
And so essentially, but that's just the very tip of the
What's it
iceberg.
called?
So it's
Yeah,
Ping pong?
look it up.
Yeah,
Comet ping pong.
Comet Ping Pong. So essentially, you remember when the WikiLeaks emails came out? You know, some people think that Russia put them out. Some people think other things, but some, information from John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager's email address, all the emails were leaked. And so, and that was on WikiLeaks. And so one of the big revelations that people felt there was in WikiLeaks was that there was all this code language that didn't make any sense. And when they broke it down, it aligned perfectly to like the child pedophilia code that criminals use on like the deep web to describe their like intentions. And so basically, when you decoded it, like they're saying stuff like, I'm gonna play dominoes on cheese pizza tonight. And like when you would decode that with those keywords, it would mean like I'm going to like order a child prostitute tonight, or like a female child prostitute, or whatever like the certain acronym aligned to, like hot dogs meant boys, pizza meant, and this is gonna sound hella crazy and like out of context, but I'm sorry. Okay, cool. And so and Comet Ping Pong has a lot of weird artwork like this. It'll have like that Baphomet 5-pointed upside down star symbol with like children like bleeding on the floor.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and people just were like, oh, it's artsy, let it go, you guys are conspiracy theorists. Okay, and so basically all the emails from James Alefantis on John Podesta's leaked emails, basically when you decoded them, they said really suspicious things about children. They would be like, we're going to have 10 slices of pizza in the hot tub with us tonight. Remember to bring your hot dogs. And like it wouldn't make any sense. You know what I mean? But it would only make sense in that context. And so there was also an incident where people who say this has been debunked will say, oh, a crazy person got radicalized by the idea of this being true online, and so he drove up to Washington, D.C. and broke into the place with a gun. But it's interesting because that guy who broke into the place with a gun, he fired one shot and it went through the hard drive of the computer that was like subpoenaed to like determine whether the owner of the pizza shop was like this.
Way.
Yeah.
I'm like a sniper.
Yeah.
Like,
Something.
shaped thing.
Whoa.
And so that's Pizzagate. And there's a lot more to it. And like, there was a lady who was on a lot of the emails from John Podesta and James Alefantis. And she was traced to like a website where she's chilling with literally like babies. And it's like, buy an hour of good time with young Meryl, blah, blah. It's so creepy. And like, it's obviously like a pedophilia sale. And like, also another person on it was this, I'm forgetting her name, but she was with the U.S. government, and she got arrested by the Dominican Republic for smuggling a bunch of babies from Haiti when there was an earthquake and everything was disrupted. And the Dominican Republic accused her of what do you call it?
Trafficking?
Yeah. And also the name James Alefantis is very similar to J'ai Alefant or whatever in French, which means I love children. So that's just another like creepy factor. Yeah. And like, also on James Alefantis' Instagram, the owner of the pizza thing, not only did he have this kind of art in his pizza store, but also he had like inordinate amounts of like pictures of children on his thing, and like there'd be creepy comments, and like he had pictures of like a van, and he'd be like, got a new van, and like people on like his friends on the comments would be like, is that the kill van? And like shit like that. But it kind of looked like they're joking, but it was kind of like all his comments were like that. And so those all got exposed, and it became even more mysterious.
To their restaurant.
Guy Ferrari.
Oh shit, really?
I said
Guy
Ferrari.
Ferrari.
I didn't say Ferrari. I said Ferrari. I said Ferrari.
No, you said Ferrari.
All right.
It's not Ferrari. I know
Nevertheless, so let's move on to Jeffrey Epstein. So since this is in the news, okay. So this is an image of Jeffrey Epstein's island. Okay, and so and also on the Pizzagate thing, just as a quick caveat, they also talked a lot about like occult or like demon worshipping things on their on the emails that got leaked. They said, oh, should we sacrifice a chicken to Moloch, which is basically like a ritual that's done, and Moloch was like an ancient god of like destruction. And also they said, oh, are we going to do spirit cooking? And spirit cooking is basically where you like drink a bunch of different types of human excrement in order to do some type of like satanic ritual. And so it's weird as fuck. I don't know.
They're fucked up.
Okay.
They're bored. They're bored. They're bored.
They're
Lots of
yeah.
office like everyone else.
They're rich as fuck, and like they're, you know, and they're sociopaths, and they're
just numb.
yeah, totally. Like they have nothing thrills them anymore, so they want to do crazy shit.
Also, they're like, because they're so rich and privileged, they've just been born and bred into this like alt-right idea that like what they do doesn't have any consequences, because it actually doesn't.
It doesn't.
Like,
yeah,
how
that's
many
true.
of these people did anything happen to besides Jeffrey Epstein? Like, nothing.
Yeah.
And
because
for years
And
later,
these are only the people that we know about. Like, think about it. Rich people have no consequences. Like, even our president was like, I'm gonna get ASAP Rocky out of jail. Like, who knows whether like anything happened, or even people with like, the guy who sang, whatever that song by Ignition.
Oh, R. Kelly.
Everyone, you know, like people are so divided because they're like, oh, but they have done so much for us because they're like,
Singing.
they're singing or they're popular, like cool, rich. They don't have any consequences ever.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And that's like a big theme that runs through this. And that's why, you know, if the definition of Satanism isn't like praying to like a anthropomorphized deity, but it's actually like basically living life in an immoral way, it shows how with the web of different connections, as we all step up in a way to be moral and adhere to do no harm, take no shit, you know, obey natural law, obey the golden rule. Imagine like if the cops in these cases would have not been able to be coerced. Imagine if the judges wouldn't have been able to be pressured. Imagine if the masses of people wouldn't be able to be manipulated to think it's just all bullshit, you know?
I think
Like,
what stops
we'd be a lot
people
further.
now is like people are afraid of exposing like one thread in this entire like web
Yeah.
of lies, making literally society turn on its head,
They're
being
not
like,
huge.
Yeah.
oh, the police, the FBI, the
Yeah,
president,
it's not
the
just
government,
one thing. It's
everything.
Oh, yeah,
is
that's true.
just like of
That's
people that are
so
fucked
true.
up and do like really bad things, and they're supposed to be the people that make all the rules and like keep us all
Yeah.
the time, but those are the worst people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're like, what would happen if everybody finally figured out how bad everything was? People would turn to their own like militia mentalities.
That's
like,
true.
Fuck the police. I'm gonna do whatever I want because the police are all perverts. You know. Like,
That's very true. Yeah, and like there's a concept called soft disclosure, which is basically the theory that like some of this stuff leaks out thing by thing because otherwise we would, you know, the masses would go insane.
Yeah.
And so
they control it like so much down to the T.
Yeah.
Like
We're
it's,
ready
like,
for this
very
one.
like yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're
Exactly.
preparing this. All right, leak it.
yeah, like why is all this shit coming out right now?
Wrap it
Kind
up
of
half.
there's so
Yeah.
much like info coming out right now about like UFOs and stuff, but you know 5 years ago that would have been sort of laughed out of the room. But anyway, like to focus on the Jeffrey Epstein side of it, so that's an image from his island. You know, obviously, so he recreated a, you know, effigy of the Temple of Solomon, which is interesting. And he had a lot of other like mysterious religious imagery on the island and surrounding him. And, you know, yeah. And so that's obviously a common thread through all these things. And, you know, survivors of Jeffrey Epstein have also claimed that, you know, there was like satanic rituals involved and stuff. And, you know, I guess it's to be determined whether the characters doing this actually like, whether like the pedophiles actually believe in like the, you know, satanic rituals, or if it's a way to fuck with people's minds or whatever. You know, I'll go back to that definition I proposed about satanic ritual abuse, where it's like, it's either to, you know, stunt people's development, or it's to create, you know, I wonder what kind of weird like super spy, conscienceless James Bond person you could create by experimenting on them, right? And also it's just to satisfy like the people who are doing it. And so, you know, the pedophiles. And so essentially, there were experiments back in the day in the 70s and 60s called MK Ultra. I don't know if you've heard of that. Stranger Things is loosely based around MK Ultra, actually. There's some elements that they took from that. And MK Ultra was essentially a thing where the CIA was attempting to do mind control and get people to like obey, you know, commands without question by doing it's alleged that there is sexual abuse with it, but they're also doing like exposing people to sleep deprivation, LSD, weird chanting and stuff, just ways to like where they could try to break people's spirits essentially or twist their minds to like cause them to just be really obedient. Yeah, and a lot of people who are like associated with this stuff are like, you know, these guys are associated with like old MK Ultra trainers or like institutions that have done that. And so anyway, with Jeffrey Epstein, there's a lot of information out about it right now, so I won't like focus on the stuff that's readily available. But some creepy things. His colleague Ghislaine Maxwell, who was kind of like his girlfriend, kind of like his partner in crime. Yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell. Her father was the head of Israeli Secret Service. So you see different countries' secret services pop up. Her father was the head of that, and actually a lot of people think that he was assassinated back in the day. But he died kind of in a sketch way. And so that's her connection to, you know, higher institutions. Jeffrey Epstein, a lot of people actually theorize that he was running a blackmail operation or that he was attempting to get, you know, people to be exposed. And obviously, like, Bill Richardson, the former governor of New Mexico, he was named in, like, a recent police filing as being, like, hands-on molesting kids with Jeffrey Epstein. Clinton and Trump have been to his island, you know, so it's both sides of the political spectrum. And yeah, and then so and a lot of other people have been to his island, and so and also a lot of people no one really knows where he got his like quote unquote billions. They don't know if he's a billionaire, if he's just a multimillionaire, but see, Avery.
Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Take off in a couple minutes.
Yeah, but I'll wrap this up here. Okay, so yeah, basically with Jeffrey Epstein, a lot of weird connections. He has like no past. They also, when they were searching his place, found a visa or a fake passport of his from Austria that showed a Saudi Arabian address. So he has the attributes of like a secret agent. And my theory is that they would take a guy who has a weird predilection for, you know, having sex with children, and they basically give him what he wants in exchange for setting up like, you know, these stings against, you know, influential people so that they can have the influential people always toe the whatever's politically correct line, you know, or whatever's like benefits the higher ups, you know, opinions. And so like, yeah. And he recently died in jail under suspicious circumstances.
4 days
Taken
ago,
off.
5 days ago.
Yeah.
Taken off suicide watch for no apparent reason.
Yep. And then that brings us to, you know, intelligence agency connections. I kind of sprinkled this in throughout. But there was a famous person from the CIA who was kind of a whistleblower. And I forgot his name, but, you know, it was in the 70s or 80s when there was a lot of, like, U.S. participation in, like, South American drug trade and stuff. And he basically, and you know, back then we were assassinating a lot of dictators and, you know, in the Middle East and in South America. And in the Soviet Union, maybe, I don't know. But, like, essentially, he exposed a big manifesto that he wrote about, and they got it through a Freedom of Information Act, about how the CIA carries out assassinations. And basically they said, you don't, like, we usually don't bother carrying them out. We just make sure that the security around that person is relaxed on that day. And eventually they'll just get caught slipping. And so a lot of people say with other, like, famous assassinations like MLK, Kennedy, things like that have nothing to do with this topic, obviously. Yeah, that, like, on that at that time, their you know, their security, where the fuck was their security, you know? Mm-hmm. Same thing with, like, Princess Diana, interestingly enough. I may do a thing on that.
Okay.
But yeah,
She
so
was killed.
Yep.
yeah, and so a politician in the Nebraska thing with the Franklin scandal, he said that he would get threatening calls all the time, and the FBI stepped in and threatened a lot of people in that case. They threatened a lot of people in the Epstein thing. Like, the FBI, CIA, basically, when a case is too sensitive, they've been known to step in, especially in these particular cases, and say, like, dude, this is above your pay grade. That's exactly what they said to Alex Acosta, who was the prosecutor when Jeffrey Epstein's case first came to Florida. He said that like intelligence agents came up to him and were like, Epstein's an asset, Acosta. This is above your pay grade. Like this is none of your business. Like if you want to advance your career, just chill where you are, you know? And, you know, I want to see people in that situation step up and like take the consequences of that, even if it's not their fault that they're given that ultimatum. I want to see them like step up and expose something, but Alex Acosta did not, allegedly, and that's kind of the dynamic that we're stuck with. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole presentation on satanic ritual abuse. I hope it, you know,
It's a good one.
created curiosity.
Crazy. Oh my god.
Or we should do Princess Diana next week so we can all prepare.